Hello, we are professional Christians.
We're live?
We're live.
Welcome everybody. This is the first ever podcast of Professional Christians. Here we are.
Numero uno, here we
Number
are.
one. So we got sound, we got visuals. I'm really hoping that we don't have to do this again. That's kind of our MO. Not do another episode again. I mean, like, think about when we did the interview with Melinda and things like that, how often we mess up on the first time and we have to do the entire thing again.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have audio, so that was kind of...
Yeah.
That's true.
It was a great video.
It was okay.
With
Yeah.
no audio.
It was good preparation. But
You know what they say?
what do they say?
You miss 100% of
Stop.
the shots you don't take.
I told him
I'm just trying to drop some wisdom on this podcast. We want this to have value to everybody who listens.
That's true. That is absolutely true. I am Collin Frisch. This is my dad. Say hello.
I'm Ron.
That's right. Who are we? They know our names. But say they just clicked on this video on YouTube or whatever, and they find us. Who are we?
We're just two dudes.
We are two dudes. We got three dudes. We got Ryan in the corner.
Yeah. Rise
But
behind
he's off camera.
the
so
board.
he's
Yeah, back here.
The guy we'll make fun of, I guess.
Our
Pretty much.
producer,
Producer, the Jamie.
making
Yeah.
it all happen.
Making sure audio doesn't stop. That's all.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're two dudes that love Jesus, love the church, and we're just trying to figure out how we can love God well and do a good job leading a church and reaching more people. So
What is your job?
I'm the lead pastor at The Bridge Church
The
in
Bridge.
Hamilton, New Jersey.
I am the creative director at The Bridge Church in Hamilton, New Jersey. Rye, you could say your job too.
I am whatever Pastor Ron asks me to do.
That's right.
At the Bridge Church in New Jersey.
Self-proclaimed youth director extraordinaire.
Yep.
Communications, whatever we need him to do.
director, production,
Content manager.
director, live stream video
Lifter
director.
of heavy things.
That
That's
one.
true. There's a lot that when people ask me what I do for a living, like the honest answer is a lot of manual labor.
Yes.
The hours of stacking chairs and rolling tables. We have to roll some tables today.
There's a lot of moving stuff involved in ministry.
Yes.
Less now than there used to be. Maybe
There
we'll
used to
get
be-
into
that's
that.
Yes, I hope
It's gotten better, but it's still not great.
That's true. Okay. The next question I have is, why are we doing this podcast? What are we trying to do with it? What's the point of this? Why are we here?
What do you think?
Well, you gave me a notes about the specific goals. I can read those if you want. I think we're here because we know from working in a church that behind the scenes there can be the illusion of a distance or a lack of transparency. I think one of the really cool things about this podcast is we'll get to just be really open about a lot of the specifics, the nitty gritty, the practical stuff that you do when you work for a church staff. We pray for people and we get to, sing songs and preach messages, but that's like 5% of what we do, maybe even less. That's a couple hours on Sunday versus hours and hours of preparation for Sunday and small groups and organization and managing people, hearing testimonies. There's a lot about that. So what we want to do with this podcast is invite people who are interested into that, because we find it really interesting and fun, so much so that we want to do this with our lives. We are professional Christians. And it's also just really cool. Podcasts are, not really a new medium anymore. They're pretty established and, all things to all people so that some might be saved, that some might be so that people could benefit from it. And I think too, our church is at a really unique spot. This is kind of teasing ahead of what I want to get into a little bit more. We're not a mega church. We're up in New Jersey, but we're not a small church anymore. We're a medium church, and a medium church is a really interesting spot to be in. And I think there are a lot of small churches that are hoping to grow, to see more people come to faith and discipled and all that. And I think there are also quite a few medium churches that are also dealing with similar problems and I guess puzzles to solve that we are. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, one of the sayings we have here at the Bridge Church is that we're building the plane while we're flying it. And it's kind of funny because even with this podcast, I mean, we don't have this like big, well thought out strategy or a bunch of topics already that we're going to discuss. And we're kind of like, well, let's just see where this thing goes, where the Lord takes us with it. Yeah. And that's, how it's been for us. And so kind of inviting people into that process of, okay, what's our next step to take in this endeavor that we're on to reach people that are far from God. And again, to kind of pull back the curtain, because what Collin said is so true. Like, most people see what happens on Sunday morning or on our online presence, but they really have no idea, like, what is it that we do all week long and how much, goes into it, and what's the thoughts behind what you're doing, and how do you go through, that whole decision-making process, and then, developing a strategy and all of those things. And we're, continuing to dream. I think you talk about the middle-sized church, the mid-sized church, the medium church. Thank you. And we have, I think for most medium-sized churches, we have a big vision, but a relatively small amount of resource.
Yeah.
And so like mega churches, they can do things at a scale that's like, it really does like compete with anybody and everybody out there. You go to an elevation church and the production quality of what you're seeing there is like you're at any concert that you could go to. A middle-sized church, a medium-sized church, I can't get that right, a medium-sized church, there you are. You don't have that, and yet we do aspire to excellence, and so I'm sure we'll be talking about things like that.
And just because your church isn't a humongous, 1,000-people church, people's expectations, like with the internet today, people know what good music sounds like. People know what good video looks like. So just because they might give you some credit if you're a tiny little church with no shame in that, but they're not gonna think that it's quality. They're not gonna think that it's excellent because we're exposed to music all the time. We take in a lot of that, and so excellence, I think, matters maybe more today than it has in a while.
Yeah.
Just because people, it's sad because we're indulged by consumerism that we have whatever we want whenever we want it. But I don't want to just give up and just be like, well, the people won't listen because we can't get it together. There's only so much you can do, but we want to strive to be as excellent as possible because that excellence is one tool that God gives us to bear witness to the world that we actually have something worth saying.
Yeah, and what I'll add on to that, or the caveat I'll give is, and we talk about this a lot here with our team, but excellence looks different at every level.
Yeah.
And so I would say what excellence looks like for a church of, 70 people, it may be a guy up with an acoustic guitar and they might do a really excellent job, and it's appropriate, and that is excellence for the scale of where they're at.
Know the scale, the room that you're in.
In fact, if you kind of go too much overboard, it can almost seem pretentious or over the top, when you don't have that quality. If we brought a crane into our auditorium, it would be cool, but it'd be kind of silly. Yeah, right.
Who would that be for? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be extra. And so excellence is different on different levels, expectations. The more you grow, the more that excellence evolves. And so you kind of have to keep raising the bar of your expectations for yourself, for your teams as you grow. Because that's what, people come in with those expectations too. And so yeah, but excellence, I think, is the goal. Whether you're a small church, medium-sized church, mega church, excellence should always be what we're striving for, because it's for God and He deserves our best.
100%.
And that's a take. No, just kidding.
Yeah. No, I mean, that could be it. But I think we have more to say. One of the things I want us to describe our church. We've told people that we're a medium-sized church and that we are in New Jersey. It's called the Bridge Church. But yeah, what's the brochure? What are we looking at?
Yeah, so first of all, just to give a little bit of demographics, I would call us a suburban community, but on the edge of urban. Certainly, we're just a couple of miles up the road from Trenton, which is very urbanesque.
Yeah, it's a city.
It's a city. And, we have people that take the bus even to this area, even to our church. And so, it's not like we're in this like downtown area, but it's, you're here, it's populated, it's expensive. It doesn't have a strong church culture that you see in some other parts of the country. So people, like, for the most part, the average person that we run into, like, I think church just doesn't seem relevant to them, probably more than anything else. I think that there was a time where it was like, from the previous generation where people had like bad church experiences, and that still can happen for sure. But there's a lot of people in our community that just have no church experience.
It's alien.
Yeah.
It's alien.
So they have no idea. And what's funny about our church is, for whatever reason, when people do come, they wander in, somebody invites them, whatever it is. And it's almost like shocking to them because they show up. And so in other parts of the country, that might be lost. To have a church where things aren't formal and, where the music is modern and the dress is casual and all of that. But here, that's still like...
That's cutting edge.
Yeah, that feels cutting edge. And I like that. It may be harder to do ministry here, but there's something refreshing about that, and just seeing that person who comes in from a no church background or a very formal church background, that's the only exposure that they've had, and when they walk through the doors the very first time, and they kind of you just see them and usually it takes a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because at first they're just kind of watching, and I'm sure you see it when you're leading.
Yes.
And then they start to warm up, and you could just see that comfort level grow, and then the feedback that we get. So as far as our church, we are a church that unapologetically is here to reach people that are far from God. And, we think every church has its own flavor, and that's a good thing, different strokes for different folks. For us, we want to be a church where people who wouldn't normally go to church or think that church was relevant or feel comfortable in church would come and just feel like this is a place where they can explore faith and begin a journey. And obviously our prayer for every one of them is that journey would lead them to a relationship with Christ. But we're honored, and we tell them that we're honored just that they show up and that we have a chance to extend the hand of friendship and community to them. And, oftentimes that's the context that the gospel is most readily delivered, is in the context of community and relationship. And so that's what we're about here. And God's put us in the perfect spot for that. I've been giving this statistic from the days of our launch as the Bridge Church, but if you drew a 5-mile radius around where we're at right now, more than half of the people claim no religious affiliation whatsoever. None. Yeah, they're nuns. What are you? What religion are you? None of the above. And so for us, when we looked at that, and that means that's about 130,000 people in that category in just a 5-mile radius. It's like, man, those are the people that we feel called particularly to go and bring the good news of the gospel to them.
The one thing New Jersey has is people. We are in the most densely populated state in the U.S.
Yeah.
And pizza.
And
really
pizza
good
is
pizza.
really going for us too. Yeah. Which you already kind of dived into this a little bit, but could you tell the story of the church? Oh, we can jump in as we see necessary. But how long have you been here as the lead pastor or pastor, I guess?
So that's a great question. So I think it's been around 8 years. And the genesis of the Bridge Church is interesting because we have like multiple beginnings, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
In that we're a church that was birthed out of another church or rebirthed. My parents, when I was 6 months old, moved up from South Florida, and their desire was to plant a church in New England. They made it to New Jersey. They thought New Jersey was part of New England. And my dad was a history buff, knew of Trenton and its historical context. They were just moved. They saw the amount of people that were here and how few like churches that were alive.
Yeah.
And they just felt like, man, this is where God wants us to plant. And so the really cool thing is my parents planted that church when I was 6 months old. I got to grow up with the church. And my dad pastored, was the senior pastor, the lead pastor for 40 years until I came back into the picture. My wife, Michelle, and I were gone from the area for about 20 years in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And but a conversation happened while we were living abroad in Spain about what the plan was for the future of the church that my parents had pastored for all those years. And we just started to talk about what it would look like if we rebirthed the church with a fresh vision, a new approach to things, but the same message. You know, one of the things my friend Tim Lucas says up at Liquid Church is that we're married to the message, but we're dating the methods.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we really believe that. And so we're evolving. I mean, we've evolved even in the 8 years that I've led here. If there's one thing I think that our people are accustomed to, it's change.
It's change.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we just need to be ready to pivot.
It took a long time for us to get that way.
Oh, boy, yes.
Oh, my gosh. It's so much more. It's really a lot easier to be a church staff when your church is accustomed to change and welcomes change.
Yeah.
It's almost funny because when I talk with, we're part of a network of pastors. And so I have conversations with other pastors and even in the area. And when I talk about some of the things that we're doing or some of the changes that we've made, and they're just like, man, like, how do you do that? And so often it's like not even a thought to us. It's just like, well, yeah, we're going to do
We're
this.
making it up. We're
like,
trying
this is
different
what
stuff
we
out. And the church goes, sure, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't even get, like, literally, we don't get any pushback. I mean, there's no emails. There's no, people, calling upset because we changed this or we did that. And there were in the early days.
For sure.
And we just had to lovingly, graciously remind them of the vision and the why behind the what. And it got to the point now where that's just in the water. Change is in the water.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing we can brag about as a church. You know, we try to have really good preaching. We try to have really good music, etc. But that's actually really cool that our church has that. It's very rare. We're rare,
nimble.
I think. We are
Highly
agile.
flexible. Yeah. So anyway, we came back 8+ years ago, and the church, it really was a typical, theologically, the camp that they would be in, the tribe would be Baptist. Mm-hmm. And not part of a denomination or anything, but that was their independent church. And so we felt like one of the things that we needed to do in rebirthing this church was a new name and a fresh vision. And so that's what we did. And there were
what
many,
was the old name?
The old name. And this is kind of funny. I don't mean any
No disrespect.
Anybody
said with love.
from a church with this name or like we have a lot of love for it. But the name was New Testament Baptist Church. And the reason that I think that's a little bit funny is because in like a post-Christian world that we live in today, like I understand the idea of the New Testament church. But like the average person out there has no clue. And so we would get questions like, well, do you guys believe the Old Testament?
That's literally the most common. So if you didn't grow up in church, you would just be like, okay, those are Bible-y words, means nothing to me, right? Which denominations get that a lot. But if you did grow up in church, maybe a little bit. I remember going to like Christian camps or whatever and talking about my church, and they were like, "Why do you guys only believe the New Testament?" And I was like, "What? No, that's just the name."
It wasn't great.
No.
It wasn't fantastic for marketing, and certainly if your target group is people that are far from God, it just didn't.
It's
make
alien,
a lot of sense.
yeah. It's distant.
So there's an iconic bridge in Trenton called the Trenton Makes the World Takes Bridge, and it dates back to decades before when Trenton was producing a lot of, especially steel. I mean, we have the steel that's on the Golden Gate Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. All of that was made in Trenton. Shout out to Trenton. And I love the city of Trenton. I really do. I really, really do. And so, when we were thinking about, well, what name should we go with? It just made sense, this iconic bridge that kind of represents the area. And also, obviously, it has spiritual connotations to it as well, and that Jesus is the bridge that gets us from where we are in sin to where God is in righteousness. And so we just thought that was a good fit for us. It's funny because back then I didn't know of other bridge churches. I mean, I think maybe I knew like one or two other bridge churches in the country. Now it seems like there are bridge churches.
They copied us.
They're all over.
Some with the same logo we have.
That's true.
It's kind of a funny thing. We've had a couple of people that, by our estimations.
They ask us to use it after they've already implemented.
No.
They don't even ask?
No.
It's just, just pops up. It's cool.
It's a form of flattery, right?
It is. Our logo is awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. And honestly, we got it from a place where we did write it and that we adapted it and had a company do it and build it all out. But that's for another day.
That's right.
But, that's the name. And so what happened was we spent a few years just laying the groundwork with the people that my dad had pastored for all those years. And finally, we got to the point where we really needed to just launch out and get a fresh start. We put our old property up for sale, which was a big deal. And really, that was sort of the end point for a lot of people who had been part of my dad's church. They just weren't ready, and for good reason, honestly. Part of it was they just didn't quite catch the vision for some, but also part of it was those people were tired. I mean, they had grinded for years and done
40 plus years of, faithfully going.
And so the idea at the time, we went from being in this small, pretty rundown building that just had a lot of limitations.
It was not a good building, yeah.
Our worship leader, Chris, who's was a mentor to Collin. We'll probably have him on the podcast sometime. And he was like over 6 foot. And when he was on the stage, like if he would like do like just a little bunny hop, he would hit his head because there were these beams
we could barely have a stage. Like it was only like a couple inches tall because if we went anything higher than that, like we would run out of ceiling.
It was very limiting. It was
hard to light. It was hard to do a lot of things.
And then even
we
more,
filled it up very quickly.
Even more. So the building sat, and again, this is no shame that God used this property in this building for many years. I grew up on that,
blessing,
so I have this love-hate relationship. But I will say, like in the modern world, in our context today, like you came onto the property and it was 10 acres. Of about half of it was wooded, and the building was back on the back corner of the property in this wooded area. It was creepy. Like it kind of had like compound like vibes to it.
Yes, very much like a horror movie set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't great.
It was very damp.
You had the big twisting driveway.
Yeah.
Yes.
All the way getting up to the building.
And
it was a long, ominous ride through this giant field with these big old trees. And for, basically decades, leaves had been falling down onto the property. And there were so many leaves, so many trees that no one could possibly rake them. And so there were just rotting leaves all over the property. Am I wrong?
I think that different seasons, depending who we had, and it was a lot. It was a lot, and to be honest, it became like an albatross because, like, for my dad, who was now approaching 70, and a lot of his time was spent
doing manual labor.
Doing manual labor, like keeping up on the property, and so like we kind of joke about it, but the truth is that building went from being a gift and a blessing and a tool for many years to being something that was actually standing in the way of progress. And so I think churches, if there's like a lesson out of that, is like, there are no such thing as sacred cows that can't be sacrificed for the glory of God. And so, one of the things we did was we sacrificed a lot of sacred cows.
Yeah.
And, we were fortunate because of my relationship and, of course, my dad still being around and being so supportive in those early days. We had the credibility, we had the leverage to be able to sort of cash in those chips and say, hey, just trust us on this. And so all that to say, we led through that season. We relaunched the church in January of 2019 with about 100 people. I would say it was 50-50. 50 of those people were people from my dad's years.
Yep.
And they're still with us today.
They are.
And then there were another 50 or so that we had picked up because really the first phase of our church's, genesis was I grew the church from about 130 people down to about 100 people. Grew it in the wrong direction anyway. And then it was a slow build. We launched with 100 people. We were at this portable location. We were there and we saw a lot of growth in those early days. We went in the first year at that location, we went from around 100 or so people to about, I think, maybe 230 people that would gather in 2 Sunday services.
Right.
We launched with 2 services right from the get-go. We had this strategy and we cast this vision that, serve one, sit one, work one, worship one. And so that's language we used a lot, especially back in those days. It's been a little bit of a transition coming out of COVID where you don't have as many people doing that. But I would say we still have a pretty good, a pretty good buy-in to that. And now we have 3 Sunday services. So that's changed it a little bit. But anyway, we launched there and then COVID hit. And I don't want to get too far into our story because I think there's probably different things to say at different chapters.
For sure.
But
we'll get all into the lore.
I can give you the present just because I know, context. So right now, without preacher numbers, and I say that, it's kind of funny to say that, but there's a sad part of that I'm guilty of too. Like, we're going to be real and authentic in these conversations.
That's the goal.
Yeah. And so it's like I get around my pastor friends and you just feel this pressure to kind of
juice the numbers a little bit.
Yeah,
optimistic numbers.
What are the
you're not lying.
What are the animals that make themselves bigger? Like they can blow up or whatever.
Lots of birds.
Yeah.
Do that,
Pufferfish.
They
Or there's a
posture.
A pufferfish.
I know there's a lizard that has
pufferfish.
Lizard. Yeah, pufferfish.
That's lizard. And pastors can kind of be that way. Like we get with other pastors and it's and this is weird. Like every stage. And I'd love to hear in comments or whatever if you're feeling.
We're disabling comments immediately.
No,
I do not trust you.
No. We are welcoming comments, good or bad.
We'll debate this off camera.
Anyway, my
bad comments. No,
we welcome it all.
Welcome it all.
Way.
We want the feedback.
Feedback.
Sure. All right, sure.
You just feel this this pressure to always present things in the best possible light. And we have so much to be grateful for. We've seen God do amazing things. And the story of the Bridge Church is a story of new life. And it's a story of sustained growth faithfulness, all of those things. But there's really good chapters and there's some really hard chapters in that book. And so we want to be honest. And even when we talk about numbers and decisions and all these things, we're very proud of where we're at. We are. And so on a Sunday morning between the 3 services, we'll see somewhere around 400 people. Mm-hmm. And obviously on big days that can swell. There's, Sundays where we have bad weather or just for whatever reason, it can go down. But we're kind of hovering right in that 400 range right now. So we launched with about 100 people, back in 2019. When we came back to meeting after COVID, we were back down to that number again. Even though we had grown to 235 or whatever in that first year, we were right back to the starting place, maybe a few more than that. And what was cool though is coming out of COVID, we saw growth, but it was more sustainable and gradual. And so like it was exciting. The like rocket growth is exciting, 100 to 200 really fast, but it creates some challenges with it. For instance, we had a lot of people who showed up who had no church background, no religious background. And so you've got all these people who need to be discipled, but no disciplers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this time around, coming out of COVID, it's almost like it was a blessing for us because it gave us a reboot.
It was a big pause.
Moment. And we definitely structured things differently. And even though there's been sustained growth and we went from 100 now to, 400, it's been more gradual. And I feel like it's been a healthy growth.
We have a better balance
Yeah.
of brand new Christians and more discipled Christians.
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah.
language I would use.
Yeah, for
Churched.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're excited about what's in front of us, and that's one reason why we wanted to do this podcast, because we're having a lot of conversations. I mean, if we just stay doing what we're doing right now, like I am convinced, at best, we'll be the size we are. And when we talk about that, it's not because we're chasing a specific size church.
No.
It's just we're in this area that's so densely populated, and there's so many people that are far from God that it would be sinful of us in our situation to not have a desire and passion to continue to grow, because that's what's going to happen if we're reaching more people. And so it can look differently. It might be in church, planting other churches or opening other locations. All of those things are on the board. Or in our situation, what we've done in the here and now is to launch more services. And so we went from 2 services last year. We added a 3rd service in, and we saw the church grow by
Which is a big risk.
It was a
didn't know
huge
if it was
risk.
going to work. We'd never done 3 services before. We were very comfortable with 2 services.
And that could be another episode where we talk through
Yeah.
the nuance of 3 services and the challenges, because 2 is kind of like easy, serve one, sit one. I'd love to talk about like
we'll do a whole episode on
on services, because I have
for different
talked
size
with
churches.
friends and even mentored a couple of pastors, and a real sticky point for a lot of churches is launching that 2nd service, and I have some strong opinions on that. So I won't say it now, but I just have some strong opinions.
Can't spoil it.
That's right.
spoil it.
We got to save it. You touched on that for a little bit. You don't have to go real in depth, but just future hopes and dreams for the church. What's something you're excited about? That an area that we're growing in, or an area that we aspire to grow in, or a change. We bragged about being good at it.
Yeah. So, our church, probably the strength of our church has always been our adult worship experience. And I had a background as a worship leader, and then, we were blessed to have an amazing worship leader come in the early days and really develop a culture. And then Collin was mentored by him and then stepped into that role.
Absolutely.
Rye is a big part of that. And so there's just been a culture of excellence in regard to, I think, all things related to the adult worship service. And then there's some areas where there's lag, and I think every church experiences that. Some churches, their growth engine is their kids ministry, or their growth engine is their small groups, or, whatever it is. But ultimately what we strive for, in the language we use here at the Bridge Church, and we're going to be talking about it this weekend, is that, we want to be a church that really follows the blueprint of Acts 2:42. What you see 42 through 47. And so you see big church, small church, they're in the temple and that large gathering, but they're also in homes, and they're breaking bread. They're having fellowship. They're opening up the word together. There's a commitment to there. They're praying for each other. All of those are hallmarks of what a healthy church looks like. And so for us, I would just say we want to continue to round out those areas that are lagging behind. So developing our small groups, we call them connect groups here at the Bridge Church. But getting, the goal is 100% of our people in our community that they would be in some type of small group, our kids ministry, to see, those young families. I had a conversation with our kids director. I'm sure she'll be on at some point.
She will.
And we had a conversation about just the kids in this area. And I was driving around the corner and I got behind a school bus. And you know how it is when you get behind a school bus? You get behind them every stop.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I stopped. I see these parents come and all these kids are pouring out, just elementary age kids. And the thought crossed my mind, do they have any idea that the Bridge Church exists? And if they do, they think that it would be relevant to their family's needs. And, I want to be able to answer that question with a resounding yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was around the corner from where our church, meets and gathers, our central location. And so for me, I mean, we can't do that in every community. We can't do that in every neighborhood, but we sure can do it in this neighborhood where they'll know we exist and they know what we're about and on some level what it is that we have to offer to them. And so there's work to be done in that. And that's exciting because to me, it's low hanging fruit. It's obvious, what steps we need to take next, but we'll get into the weeds on that as time goes on, I'm sure.
I think our battery just died.
Timeout. Hey guys, we're back. Our camera died, but it should be good now. But my dad was just saying, one of the things that we want to be part of this podcast strategy, thinking about who is this for? If you're tuning in, why the heck are you here? It's called Professional Christians. We are all on a church staff. So that's kind of who the audience is for. Other people who love the Lord, are working in churches of all shapes and sizes, who are dealing with some similar stuff as we are. If you're tuning in and you're from our church, amazing. Hello. You know us. If not, we still want this to be useful for you, even if this is all you know of the Bridge Church.
Yeah, and I would just add that, we're professional Christians,
It's tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, tongue-in-cheek. But I would also say just if you have a high level of engagement in ministry, you could be a volunteer at church.
Precisely.
You could be on a board at a church. I know there were years where I did that at a church, and I mean, I really didn't feel any differently than if they had been paying me a salary. And so, welcome, and we want this to be valuable. These are conversations that we're going to have that are really happening here, and I have a feeling some of the questions that we're trying to answer and work our way through are the same questions that you are. And so some of it is going to be us just inviting you into those conversations because we're getting ready to make a major change here at the Bridge Church. And I think it's super high risk. I really do.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that. We've got some work to do around the strategy and casting the vision and communicating the vision and then we don't know if it's going to work. So you're going to have a front row seat to maybe
as this plays out in live time,
a success or maybe a failure. And that's the reality is we're trying things, and if we're not failing some of the time, then we're probably not operating in faith, and we're probably not taking the risks that are necessary for growth to take place.
There should be adventure. There should be some chances that you're taking.
And failure is only a failure. I know it's cliche, but a failure is only a failure if you don't learn from it. If it's a failure and you learn from it, it's not a failure, it's a lesson. And so for us, we've had those failures.
Yes, we have.
But I don't look at them that way. I really don't, because every one of those have... We've made some mistakes. We'll talk about them. I'm telling you, we have some funny...
That's the most interesting stuff to me, honestly.
Funny stories. Yeah, Collin maybe you'll get into how in the early days of the church and what my dad's role was at the church and what my role was at the church and how we tiptoed around that, things like that are just, it's kind of comical now to look back on it. But anyway, we want this to be valuable. And also, we want to talk about things that we have seen firsthand work. And especially if you're tuning in and you're in a similar area that we are. You're up in the northeast of the country, or you're out on the west coast, in the Pacific Northwest, or you're up in Canada or other places where it's very post-Christian, perhaps post-Catholic.
Yeah.
In your community.
That's how it is with Jersey.
And then also, and I didn't really expand on this earlier, but we are incredibly racially diverse in this community.
You can't see it on camera, but Rye is a black guy.
Yeah. Well, no.
No.
Yeah. No, we are an incredibly diverse. We're father and son. And so
we have
clearly
incredibly similar
genetics.
genes. Yeah.
But I wasn't even saying our church, but I will say that the community that's around us is reflected by the community that's within.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I love is, sometimes I'm the only white guy on the stage, and that's okay. Like it does, because that's what our community looks like. It's just, we have everything.
It's New Jersey. Exactly.
And it's New Jersey. And I know that's not everywhere. That's not every part of the country. And don't feel like some, sense of guilt if you're in a monocultural place.
Because it's not a branding decision that
No.
we're multicultural. It's a necessity for us to authentically be the church in New
Yeah.
Jersey. If you're only hitting one kind of person, right? Yeah, silly as that
And
is.
we'll talk about
Yeah.
what that looks like for us. And we're certainly not the only, we're not pioneers in this.
No.
But there are things that we've seen and that we've learned along the way. And I'll give this real quick thing. One of the things I'm really proud of with our church, my dad was raised in the South and came out of a Baptist denomination, and down where he was at the time when he came to know the Lord as a kid, the churches were still segregated.
Yeah.
And that's just hard to believe that it's that recent in our history. Segregated by design. They're still pretty segregated in a lot of places. But when he moved up to New Jersey, my dad was like, I want nothing to do with that. Like, God has called us to this place. It's so
That's my grandpa.
so beautiful. And so from day one, we had people, different shades. And it was beautiful. And so I just grew up, that's the normative for me. And it's just sustained that. Even through all of our transitions, it's sustained that. And I love that. And so we're blessed. It's one of the things I love about our church. And in a place like ours, I do believe your church ought to look like the community that's around it. So
Yeah. Well, you said earlier that we are not pioneers. Like we're not necessarily inventing anything new.
No, we pretty much steal everything.
Exactly. So what qualifies us to give advice about this?
Oh, wow. That's a great idea. That's a great
Absolutely
question.
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing qualifies us.
No. Maybe
Right. That's why you're a producer.
maybe we're crazy. And what I mean is we are not opposed to taking risks.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of my friends that are in churches where, to be honest, they're stuck. They've seen no growth, or they a lot of times you'll go through, a season of growth, and then there's attrition, and you shrink, and then but you it's kind of like your weight as you get older, where you have your base weight, and sometimes you start to pay attention.
Lock in.
Yeah, you lock in. We're doing this Daniel fast
January,
right now,
yeah.
and it's good. But it always kind of levels out. And I will say there's a lot of churches that they just level out, and so they can get excited because for a season they'll see some new families come in
to Christ,
but they really don't have a model that's sustainable to continue to welcome new families into, to be able to assimilate them into the congregation, retain that. And because if you are doing that, then it's only a matter of time before your numbers are going to grow, even if it's gradual. And so for me, one of the things that seems to be the roadblock or the hurdle for those churches is they're just averse to risk. And so what I would say is, that's cool. Like, we'll take the risk. Like, we will take the risk and invite you along for the ride. And so, you know, some of the things that we have done here and that we're trying out, and again, I think the scale of where we're at, there's a lot of podcasts that you could find by the experts, but most of the experts, they're churches that are mega churches, and things just look so different in the mega church world. And that's wonderful. They're doing incredible work. And there's nothing wrong with that. The reason they became mega churches in part is because they were really healthy churches a lot of the time. Sometimes it's a personality and you know,
we all know the stories, but
yeah. But you know, we're not here to be critical of small churches or large churches or medium-sized churches. Our reality right now is that we're a medium-sized church.
Yes.
That's our reality. Your reality is whatever size church that you lead or that you're a part of. But because of that, there's certain things that we're facing right now, decisions that we're making, things that we're working through that we think will be especially relatable to people who are in either small churches who have the desire to continue to grow, which means you'll soon be a medium-sized church.
Welcome.
Or for the churches that are already there in the messy middle. They're that medium-sized church that again has this big vision. Like, man, we want to be known in every home. We want to deliver the gospel to every doorstep in our
local
community.
All around,
that's a big vision.
Yeah.
But like, what do we have for resource? Well, it's limited. And so we're talking through, you know, those creative elements and how can we make a big splash with a relatively small, you know, what's the analogy there I want to use?
A small pebble?
Pond?
Yeah, that's good.
Like David.
Yeah.
Pond and a pebble.
Small frame. Okay, sure. I'm thinking cannonball.
Big splash. Okay. That's good.
You know, when that big dude jumps in the pool and it just whoosh, like that's a mega church. Like we're like the not so big.
We're trying to belly flop.
Girthy.
We're the skinny kid at the pool trying to make a splash.
Yeah.
Right.
So
sorry, wait, did you have something to say?
No.
Rye, did you have anything to add besides nothing qualifies us to give advice? Or is that your final?
No, that's my final answer. I'm locking that in.
Okay.
No,
enough.
I mean,
you don't have to watch this. You don't have to listen to this.
No.
Turn it off.
Listen, we may be the only audience for this podcast.
And that's fine.
And we're okay with that.
Yeah.
We're entertaining ourselves.
We are entertaining ourselves, and we're also brainstorming. A lot of these conversations that we're going to have are conversations that we've already had before, or that like we're working out, we're ironing out our vision, the vocabulary, the way that we communicate this to our church, all of which matters, right?
That's sort of the idea of where this all came from, was like, hey, what if we started having these conversations that we have every week?
Because they're electrifying. They're really fun, like when you really get into it.
And it's intense sometimes for us because, you know, we'll argue it out. I mean, because you got to look at it from every side. And before you make decisions, you really have to think the whole thing, consider the cost.
And we have some strong personalities at our church, which is one of my favorite things. But I was going to ask you guys, who are you excited about having on the podcast? I guess we can keep this pretty short because they won't know who they are.
Who am I excited?
Yeah. I'm excited
that we're actually going to be able to get onto the podcast.
Pastor Marty.
Pastor Marty
was born to podcast.
No, honestly.
You'll never be the same after you hear Pastor Marty. That's all I've got to say.
An episode will never be short on content. Like,
nor
just let it roll.
Yeah. Nor illustrations.
That's right.
Yeah, Pastor Marty will be amazing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I don't have a name, but I'm excited about even inviting in maybe some other area leaders and people because one of the things, like, just to be honest, what Rye said is kind of true. Like, we aren't qualified, but we're learners.
Yeah.
And so we're just asking questions and we're looking at everything. We're watching everybody. We're reading everything that we can get our hands on because we know if we don't keep growing, we won't keep growing. And, you know, we won't keep reaching. And again, the point is there's a lot of people out there who have no idea what life is all about. And so that's the calling that we have to bring them to the true meaning of life, the giver of life. And so we're going to do whatever it takes to get there.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Okay. I have another question.
Is this going to be edited at all?
No, no editing. This is a low effort podcast.
No.
You're going to have to
No.
edit it.
Too bad I'm not editing it. No. The goal, the joy, the glory of a podcast is that there's no overhead and no effort.
So,
Like if we say something crazy, I'll edit it out. But unless
who's
something
the most
gets
likely
rough-
to say something you have to edit out, other than Pastor Marty?
You.
You.
Literally
Why?
you.
Why
you
me?
trying to be funny will go too far.
That's.
I'm not going to bring
offensive.
up examples.
That's not true. It's not true. But there may be a few examples.
Which brings me to my question. If you got fired, what would be the most realistic reason?
Wow.
Right, you can go first.
Oh, it's literally because of tardiness.
Tardiness. Yes.
It'd be tardiness.
I agree. Yeah.
You agree? You too.
No, I'm agreeing with myself.
Yeah.
Showing up late is hard. We're young guys. We're musicians.
We're creatives.
It doesn't come naturally. We're growing. We're getting better.
We are.
We genuinely are.
I
But
got
it's-
pulled over today though, so
Yeah.
that didn't help my tardiness.
You got a warning now.
I got a warning.
Why do you
Yeah.
think he just gave you a warning?
Did you hear what he told him?
Did you tell him I work for a church?
Yes.
I literally did.
The guy was like, "Where are you headed? Where are you
That's
going?"
the real reason why we all work for the ministry, because you could pull that card. I was going to Niagara Falls. I was crossing the border. The guy was kind of giving me a hard time, and he was like, "What do you do for a living?" And I was like, "I work for a church." Like, put on my goody two shoes.
Yep.
And he's like, "All right, you can go on." It's pretty nice.
So maybe you could try that
That's
too.
even
No
if you
guarantees.
don't work for a church.
No guarantees. Don't.
They're probably
don't
not
put
going
that
to
on us.
check.
Yeah.
You can lie. Yeah.
No doubt.
Stolen valor. That's
Yo,
okay.
that's crazy.
We don't mind. We don't mind.
Stolen valor.
You know.
Wow.
Yep.
Hey, I'm in the Lord's army.
Yeah, for me, it probably will be because I decided to take like a year off to like hike across Europe or something
Like without asking.
without telling anybody.
Just go.
Where's Pastor Ron?
Just schedule. We'd
he's
be like,
just-
dang, Pastor Marty's preaching a lot more than I
Yeah.
realized. Where?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Excited to have on the podcast. Yeah, what else is cool about medium-sized churches? We've already talked a lot about that, so you don't have to linger too much.
Yeah.
But what's really unique about being at the size that we're
Yeah.
at? That's different, especially from a small church.
I think the advantage to the medium-sized church, it's sort of obvious, but you have some resources. You're able to do things at a level of excellence that most small churches aren't able to do. At the same time, it still feels smallish. And this is kind of funny. It's like it's a problem, but it's a good problem for us, and we'll get into the details on this more. But our auditorium space is our biggest limiter at our current location. Yeah. It's an amazing building, great facilities. We're so grateful. But
It's
our
beautiful.
adult auditorium space is just, it's limiting. And so now we've gone to 3 services. And one of the advantages to the 3 services, and again, we'll have longer conversations around this later on, but one of the advantages is it still feels like a small church. So at any service, there may be a smallish church. I know technically that might not still qualify.
Statistically, yeah.
But, we'll have anywhere between 100 and 175 adults in the auditorium in each of those services. And so I think we still get like people like small churches,
Yeah.
like at least in this area.
Yeah.
They also like things that are excellent.
Yeah.
And so that's the tension. It's like, I really like the warmth and comfort and familiarity and all of that you get with the small church. But I really don't want the preaching to be boring. I really want the music to be well done. I want we'll get into what some of
Well-designed
those things are.
systems
I mean, just silly things like what we consider excellence and what a lot of small churches consider excellence. I would just push a little bit and say, we set the bar too low a lot of times.
We get used to stuff really quick.
We do. We just get really accustomed to it, and then we don't even notice it anymore. We do it too. We're guilty of it, and we are like constantly reflecting and conversing around what we can do to improve and making those incremental adjustments. But there's stuff that we miss all the time too. So I mean, we're kind of right there with you in it, but. I think that just the beauty of being able to be small enough to still feel like a family, but big enough to have really good kids programming and really quality music and really excellent speaking and really robust groups and all of those things. That's just hard to do when you're a congregation of 70 people. And you know what I'm talking about, those of you who are in that context. And we were that. Like, so I get it.
Yeah.
Like it's, medium-sized churches probably started as small churches and mega churches started as small churches and became, you go through the steps. So, but for us, it's not so distant. It's not in our, so distant past. And so I remember that. So we've been able to hold sort of tight to that, but obviously it can't be at the cost of not reaching more people. And so we got to figure our way out through that and how to still make people feel like the beauty that is a small church while we get bigger and bigger. And that's the tension that I think every medium-sized church and certainly every mega church, the old Rick Warren, you got to grow bigger while you grow, or grow smaller while you grow bigger. How do you do that? You do that through groups. Yeah, it's true in part, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot of, dynamics to it. Philadelphia
242.
Eagles, 242. That is our cue to pray.
I got it. Lord God, thank you for this first episode of this podcast. We just thank you for the fun, for the story that you gave us, Lord, for how far you've brought us, God. And we just pray that as the church, as a couple representatives of the church, Lord, we can do what we were established to do, Lord, and that's be a blessing for the whole world, God. It might start small, God, but we believe you can do amazing things. So please give us wisdom to have the right thing to say, and let your Holy Spirit just speak through us in ways that we wouldn't expect it to. In your name, amen.
On that note, we would like to hear from you. I know we were teasing about whether or not we were going to disable comments.
Well, it depends on how well you guys behave.
Yeah, we will delete inappropriate comments. But I would love to know, like, are there conversations you're having that you'd like to invite us into? Like, is there a topic that, like, you're just wrestling through? Is there something your church is facing? You're looking to make a decision, and because chances are we're probably thinking about it, or we have thought about it too.
Yeah.
And so we would love to hear.
We'll
and
be
this
your
is
second opinion.
I hate when podcasters or YouTubers, whatever, and they say something, and they're just trying to get comments on it, so that way they can get traction. That's not what this is about. Honestly, this will have value to us, even if nobody consumes this. But we really believe that this could have value to others as well. And we know there's a bazillion podcasts out there. We want this to be super authentic, super practical, super relevant. Any other supers?
Good.
Super fun. Like, we want you to laugh too.
Yeah.
Like we're going to have fun.
We'll try. It'll be easier when you're not on the podcast, when we have other guests.
And maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll get worse. But we're going to give it the old
college try.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Dad, what is your favorite thing about Jesus? And part two, why are you a Christian?
Ooh, I didn't know we were going to get all theologically intense.
We lost our camera again. I don't know what happened.
I guess that's the episode.
All right.
All right, that's a wrap.